Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'd like to talk about jocks versus nerds, and how this isn't real. Okay, so one thing, if you watch a certain sort of movie and certain sort of TV show or read certain sort of books, there's this perennial stereotype. It's a stereotype you find everywhere of the jocks as one caste in society and the nerds as another caste in society. And I use caste in that sense like the Indian caste system. And one of the things that almost invariably happens is used within the stereotype is that the jocks hate the nerds. The nerds, generally speaking, just want to be left alone and do their nerdy things, but the jocks hate them and can't stand them. They're jealous of them being smarter and just can't, loathe them for being weak and hate them and will play lots of practical jokes on them and will hurt them and will put them down at every opportunity and so on. And I'm not, when I say this is fake, I don't mean that this has never happened ever. And I also don't mean that you can't readily distinguish the table at which, in high school, at which people who know each other from playing sports tend to sit, and the table at high school from which people who know each other by, whether you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or you all watch a particular science fiction show or whatever, also know each other that way, and so they tend to sit together. And, that's a real thing. That's a real phenomenon. People self-segregate based upon who they actually know. And if you have nothing in common with another person in high school, the odds of you sitting at the same lunch table with them are fairly low. Moreover, it is true that the nerd group will tend to have a higher average intelligence level than the jock group will, because the nerd table or nerd tables or what have you will tend to be selected on the basis of something that does appeal to intelligence, like watching science fiction or playing chess or various things. But these hobbies tend to appeal more to a more intelligent group. And so the average intelligence will probably be a bit higher than at the jock table. You will also tend to find interest in academic activities. Again, it'll tend to cluster. But the thing is, you will find perfectly intelligent jocks. Now, the thing is, what you don't find, for the most part, is jocks who actually care about the nerds. You will occasionally find, what you will find sometimes, and this is sort of that, stereotypes tend to have some basis in reality, not always very much, but usually some. You will find people who aren't really part of the jock group, who are sort of on its periphery, who are hanging out, who really wish they could get in, who really want to be sitting there, and for anyone else there to actually like them. And those hangers-on who really aren't part of the group, they may try to seek approval by, doing mean things to someone who is outside of the group, and nerds are one of those people who are outside of the group. So that can be where you find a phenomenon like this. You will find, incidentally, the exact same phenomenon in the nerd group. If you have the nerd table, you will have the core nerds, the people who really have seen every episode of the science fiction show and can basically recite it from memory, things like that. I used to be one of those, back before I had too many things to remember and can't absorb shows like that anymore. And just because I've got so many other things I need to keep in my head for practical reasons. But you'll also find people who just aren't getting along with much of anyone, who aren't, they're usually they're above average of intelligence, by which I mean, if you use IQ as a metaphor, 100 is the average intelligence, they'll have an IQ of 105, 110, something like that. But they don't really have the same interest too much. They generally are speaking people who have very poorly developed social skills. And they want to be part of some group, and they can't obviously join the jock group because they don't have the social skills really to be part of many groups at all, but they also don't have any of the athletic ability to join the jock group. And, other groups also they don't really fit in with. And so the nerds, who tend to be extremely accepting of people in general, because the nerds are so hyper-focused on things, if you'll talk to them about the things they want to talk about, they don't care about anything else. they will, these sort of hanger-ons will come, and these are the sort of people who will actually care about the jock table. Your actual core nerds don't care in the slightest. They just want to talk about their things, argue about Star Trek or about whether Spider-Man could beat Wolverine in a fight or what have you. And so you get, again, these sort of hangers-on who will also, they won't tend to physically pick on the other group simply for the dynamics of picking on bigger people physically is stupid. But they will very much, to use the British phrase, they'll slag off on them. They will insult them, and they'll actually care, and they'll have a chip on their shoulder. Okay, so you'll find that in hangers-on in both groups. What you tend to find among jocks is they actually do like sports, and so that's what they talk about, that's what they think about. They don't really care about people who aren't doing them. In the sense that they don't really think it's interesting. The same thing with the nerds, just a different subject, and the one tends to go along with physical fitness and the other doesn't. But one of the things that you will find if you happen to be a nerd who develops the sort of physical fitness, like, for example, I was always very much a nerd, but for whatever reason, I'm a bit on the tall side, and I tend to develop muscle in response to work. So I had some muscle to work with, and for various reasons, I ended up joining my high school's rowing crew team. Now, it wasn't a super serious, we weren't the sort of teams that would tend to win matches and, win races and so on. And the crew team in general wasn't all that paid attention to by the rest of the high school, but it very much was an athletic endeavor, and there were not many people on the crew team who were very interested in discussing physics or chemistry or science fiction or, fantasy or many of those other things that I would, normally, sort of most be interested in talking to. But, the thing about it is, as long as you are adaptable, as long as you are willing to, talk to other people and find out what they actually find interesting and ask questions and learn about things that other people know about, and be willing to talk about things that other people are actually, able to talk about, as long as you have some flexibility, what I found is athletes will very happily accept anybody who is willing to actually try to be good at athletics. And I got reasonably good. I wasn't the best rower on the team, but I also wasn't the worst. And what I found was they're actually extremely accepting people. It wasn't, I'm not talking about the thing that has the most glory. I'm not talking about, I was never on the football team. But at the same time, what you tend to find, and in high school, everybody's unpolished in high school, and everyone's got their issues in high school. But especially as time wears on, one of the things you tend to find is that people who are interested in sports, who are genuinely interested in sports, behave like everybody who's genuinely interested in something, and they actually like it. And they really enjoy it when other people like it and want to share it with them too. And so, one of the things where this comes up, because I lift weights a little bit. I'm getting into it a little bit more seriously, but it's been sort of an off and on thing with me for, close to 20 years now. Sometimes I've taken several year breaks, but my best bench press ever was 300 pounds. Got so close to making 305. I wanted to not be that round number, but anyway, best deadlift ever was 375 pounds for 6 reps. At some point I'm going to work on, individual stuff. So not terrible, nothing that would get me anywhere. I wouldn't even be, if I were to go and take part in a powerlifting meet, at 6 foot tall and around 230, at the moment 235 pounds, the weight class I would be in, my total would, I'd probably be, I might be able to total close to 1,000 pounds. That's where you take the 3 lifts, the deadlift, the squat, and the bench press, and then add up what you did in the day. And so, with tapered stuff, I'd probably get a bit higher than that. I'd probably have a total, 600, 800 pounds lower than what the actually competitive people in my weight class would actually have. So, I'm far away from the big side. But I've been doing it enough that I actually lift some weights. And one of the things that I found over this time in a variety of gyms in multiple states is that if you want, the nicest people in the gym are generally speaking the biggest people in the gym. As with everything, like if somebody's in the middle of something, interrupting them is rude and they're not going to react well to that. But other than keeping somebody from doing what they're there to do, if you catch them in the moments when they're resting and so on, I have found almost invariably that the most encouraging, the nicest people you will find are the biggest people. Why? Because they really love it. The reason they're the biggest people is that they love what they're doing. They love picking up big, heavy things, which is how you get even better at picking up big, heavy things. It's a passion for them. They love it. And as any other human being does, they enjoy it when somebody else sees the beauty and the goodness and the thing that they see beauty and goodness in. And so they love it when other people want the same sorts of things that they do. And they're very encouraging of that sort of thing. Now, where is the idea? And I just want to, before I get into where did the idea come from? I want to mention the meathead idea tends to be fairly inaccurate, by the way. There is an element of truth to it, but for the most part, in any sport, in any human endeavor, you will never find the best person there of below average intelligence. It never happens, because all human endeavors tend to require some amount of intelligence. Now, in lifting the heaviest things, it's not going to be again, using IQ as a metaphor, it's not like, you can reliably have that the person who can lift the most weight will have the IQ of 160. But you can bet they're, 110, 120 at least, and often higher. One of the odd things, like if you actually get to know boxers tend to be pretty smart people, actually. For curious reasons, and I don't want to go into in boxing, boxing is a smart man's sport, really. It requires a lot of intelligence to be able to box well. And boxing isn't good for your intelligence, but there's that sort of irony there. But again, if you actually get to know boxers, they tend to, at the very least, they start smart. And this will tend to be true. So like the idea of the meathead, as in somebody who's got, no brains in their head, only muscle, that's not real. There's no reason to suppose that the best powerlifters will be geniuses by any means, but they'll tend to be of above average intelligence. But it's especially not the case that the person who loves, who's really good at lifting will have no other interest, that they will only sort of be this gorilla-like brute. They generally have other interests too. At very extremes, you will find in literally everything, the people who are the best in the world often don't have many other hobbies, simply because the people who are the best in the world are the people who dedicate their entire lives to it. And this is, whether you're talking about lifting weights, or you're talking about archery, or whether you're talking about chess, or whether you're talking about wine tasting, or it doesn't matter, whatever it is, the best in the world usually are the people who dedicate their entire life to whatever their activity is. But, take a few notches down and, people have interests. Okay, so where does the whole jock versus nerd thing and the jocks are mean to the nerds come from? And, why is this, why do you see this all over the place? And there's as I said, there's a little bit of truth to it in the hangers-on will tend to be the people who are trying to secure a place within the group that they're attempting to attach themselves to. And part of the reason why they're not actually solidly in the group is, having fewer social skills, not being as good at whatever the thing is. And so they will try other means, including like making themselves look better by putting other people down. Will tend to make them feel better too. Okay, but that's not really where the thing comes from. And if you look at fiction, when I say the thing, I mean the stereotype in fiction. It is usually the best jocks, the most athletic ones, the ones who are the biggest and the strongest and the fastest and the best at their activity, who are the meanest. And that kind of tells you what's actually going on. What's going on is not, in fact, that these are the people who pick on the other people the most. They have no reason to. Everything's going... why would they even bother? Why would they bother spending time with somebody else? Why would they bother with this? They're the people who have put a lot of time and effort into something and have gotten good at it and have the pleasure of being good at it. And here's the thing, pick up any sort of activity, whether you're talking chess or Lindy Hop or archery or, wine tasting, it doesn't really matter. if you're good at it, being good at it is pleasurable. It's rewarding. It's fulfilling. Not in a complete sense, but you're not fulfilled as a human being as if this was your sole purpose in life. But it's fulfilling in that more limited sense. You don't need to bother with other people who have nothing to do with you because you've got stuff to be doing. What's going on when you look at this is that, and you can see this, as Jordan Peterson likes to say, that any sort of standard is intrinsically a judge. That the moment you recognize something as good, it is intrinsically judging you for not being as good if you are not as good. It is setting up a standard. And what does somebody who is weak see when they look at the person who is strong? Well, there are two things you can see. One of them is you can see inspiration. This is the right way to do it. To see the person who's big and strong. Like the time I walked into the gym where I am, and there's a guy who is deadlifting with 7 plates, 745 plates on each side, which is about 650 pounds, if I recall. And stood there and he picked that whole thing up, and it was just incredible to watch. And reacting like, I'm going to work hard to do that or something like it. That's the right reaction to have. Drawing inspiration. Way to be happy in life. The other thing, and it's not intrinsically wrong, but it's very dangerous, is that is a standard to which I do not measure up to, and that is judging me as bad for not measuring up to that standard. And the reason why this is dangerous is, it's true. I mean, you are, in a natural sense, strength is a natural virtue, speed is a natural virtue, dexterity is a natural virtue, the ability to do something quickly and accurately. So juggling is dexterity because you do quick movements that are accurate. Throwing a football and having it land where you want it to land is dexterity. These, if you can't do these things, then, well, you can't do them, and you are less than you could potentially be, in some sense. And so in that sense, this standard of excellence, in the Greek sense of arete, is judging you in the sense of showing you do not measure up to it. But here's the thing. The only reason why this is even relevant, because you can look at a bird flying and yep, I can't do that. I don't measure up. It is judging me in some sense that I can't, get off the ground for any real length of time. It just doesn't work. But why does that not matter? Because we could never do it. We're not the sort of thing that could do it. It's not in our nature to do it. And so if you look at a standard and is judging you, the reason why taking that as, is judging you for something you could do if you put effort into it, this is why the correct reaction is to take inspiration. Or to admit, that's great, I'm not doing that thing, it's wonderful that this other person is. I took piano lessons for a number of years. I, was getting moderately good at it as far as not very good 10-year-olds are concerned. So, I was not playing, Mozart. But I had reasonably dexterous fingers. I could learn reasonably well. I was nowhere near great at, compared to other kids my age. But it wasn't for me. I didn't like practicing. If I had practiced, there's a reasonable chance that had I put several hours a day of practicing for many years, maybe I could have gotten to the level. It's within the realm of the possible that with all that effort, I could have gotten to the level of somebody who could play in a concert hall. Not like the big concert hall in New York City, but a concert hall. Maybe within the realm of the thinkable. It's not the sort of thing that would have been ridiculous, if I'd done it. And I looked at it, and I considered, and I thought, I don't actually like this enough to put all that effort into it. And so I decided, I'm not going to do this. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not bad. But it's not for me. And when I see somebody who did put all that effort in and is a concert pianist, what do I think? I think, that's awesome. That's great. I'm glad for them. And I love listening to them. It's wonderful that they will produce music that I can listen to. If somebody plays the Moonlight Sonata, I happen to really love the Moonlight Sonata. For example, it's just wonderful. They're giving me the gift of this music. It's wonderful that they have developed their abilities to this point. Is this judging me? No, because this was not for me. this, relative to me, is a bit like the bird. Not that it's intrinsically impossible, but this is not what my life was supposed to be about. And it is fine that this was not what my life was supposed to be about. There are other things, like I do think I should be strong, and so I'm lifting weights and working on it. And when I see strong people, I draw inspiration because I want to be stronger than I am, and I want to work at it. And so those are sort of the two ways that will maintain happiness. What will not is seeing that the thing is judging you and resenting it and disliking this fact, not accepting that fact. And this is where we get jocks versus nerds in fiction. The jock is intrinsically judging the nerd by having a standard to which the nerd does not measure up. And what you have, what's always being written in these things, is resentment of this. The nerd, and presumably it's generally the writer. They may be using a stereotype that came from some other writer. But basically, what's happening is they look at themselves, they see that they are weak and sedentary, that they do not measure up in any way, they are pathetic, and they hate this about themselves. But they don't improve it. They don't work on improving it. What they do is they resent that there is this standard that makes them feel so bad about themselves. There are these things that show them that they are deficient. And so instead of trying to improve themselves, or accepting that there are trade-offs in life and they're not going to measure up this way, they're going to do something else, and God bless the people who are going a different path than mine. We can each walk our path, and I'm glad for them that they're walking their path successfully. Instead of doing that, and it's about physical stuff in particular, because like all people, like you should not have difficulty getting up off a couch when you're younger than a certain very advanced age. And diseases, etc. aside, it should be easy for a person to get off a couch. There are things that every human being really should actually be able to do. And when you have the writers who are fairly good at writing, but have let themselves go so extremely that getting up off a couch is hard for them, for example, they know that this is their life, there's something wrong with their life. And so what they are doing when they write the jock who is picking on the nerd is that they are projecting that judgment of themselves. They loathe themselves. They hate this about themselves. Possibly they've even gone so far as to hate themselves for it, which is even, which is a step, which is much, much worse. And then they're projecting this hatred for themselves for being so sedentary and so weak onto the standard that is judging them. And so the behaviors that are assigned to jocks commonly within movies and television shows and comic books and so on, is really the judgment. They're carrying out the judgment that the author has of himself. He's placing this judgment into the jock. And this partially without getting overly much into it, that's the main thing. What often is happening, but not always happening, when that judgment is placed into the jock is then this is enabling it to be something that is localized and then fought. So the nerd can then, by making this person, by making the jock cruel and mean and so on, and projecting this in, it then becomes possible to, by personifying this judgment into a person, then attack them for whatever flaws have been put into this jock, such as being, frequently being dumb. But often they're given others. And then they're attacked for it. And so the writer sort of achieves a symbolic victory over the judgment that he sees upon himself by personifying that judgment and then attacking that person. And in defeating that person, he feels for a fleeting moment like he has actually attacked the judgment upon himself. It doesn't work, of course, because if you're weak and sedentary, it doesn't matter how much a fictional person has defeated a fictional jock who isn't weak and isn't sedentary and made him look to be a fool or an idiot or cruel or whatever, and everybody dislikes that particular jock because, you're still weak and sedentary, and here you are struggling to get up off of the couch. And so, this is why, by the way, the ancient Greek ideal was perfection of body, mind, and soul, the tripartite division of the human being to perfect all three things. And this is why Plato, for example, who is, I don't know if I even want to say arguably, but you know what, I'll just hedge my bets and say arguably the greatest philosopher who ever lived. That word Plato, it comes from the Greek Platon, and it was basically saying that he was talking about, he was an Olympic boxer, and his shoulder, or wrestler, I forget exactly, and his shoulders were so wide, they looked like a plateau. He was just so big and so strong. And so the greatest philosopher who ever lived was also an expert wrestler. And this was the Greek ideal, that you should perfect your mind to think as well as you possibly can, perfect your body to be strong and fast and agile and healthy, and to perfect your soul, which in this case really refers to things like your appetites, to want the right things, to be repulsed by the correct things, and to want them in the correct degree, to be repulsed by them in the correct degree, and so on. And so to work on all of these things, so like your appreciation of beauty, and your dislike of vice and so on, these things, those sort of the perfection of soul aspect. And that what the philosopher should strive to do is to get all three of these things correct, because all three things make up the human being, and you should perfect every aspect of yourself. And, you know, thus you have, like, Plato, who is both the greatest philosopher and also a guy who could win at Olympic Greek wrestling, or boxing, as I said. I think he was a boxer. Although when I say boxer, like, if memory serves, the ancient Greek style of boxing would involve things like grabbing and wrestling and, you know, throwing people and stuff as well. So when we say boxing, it's not modern boxing. And so, and this is where you can really see, you know, the true overthrow of the jocks versus nerds is in the philosopher-king, the one who has perfected body, mind, and soul, all three of these things. That's really the ideal that everyone should be striving for. But as sort of just a final note, if you're ever going to actually be, if you were a nerd, and I suspect this will tend to be more of the people watching my videos because, you know, I'm a nerd, and you ever need to interact with jocks, one of the things to remember is that, like, all of those movies and comics and stuff, that's not real. That's not what jocks are actually like. You will find cruel people in the world. You will find backstabbing people in the world. But those are never the successful people. Those are the people who want to be successful and never quite are, and are always chasing it and will do anything to achieve it. Actually successful people, for the most, I mean, the backbiters will, every now and then, they'll achieve some sort of success. Sometimes they look kind of like they've achieved success too. Sometimes they'll achieve success for a short time, but, like, all of their vices always catch up with them, and it never lasts. I want to be clear, I'm not saying that all successful people are good or perfect or anything along those lines. What I mean is that the truly successful people are never the most vicious people, because you can't be at that extreme of vice and have your relationships stable with people. There will always, of course, be some exceptions, like dictators, for example. There are a few things here and there that work out, but when you're talking about anything that involves being successful at stuff with voluntary associations, it's not stable to be an extremely vicious person and to be successful. Having a vice, having a few vices, that's very compatible with being successful. Being thoroughly vicious, by contrast, is not. Anyway, when you actually deal with jocks, they're actually ordinary people. And if you are trying to do anything physical, the people you want to find are the jocks who have done it. Because it's really kind of interesting, but, like, you want to know who's the biggest cheerleader for, like, a person who is, you know, really fat and out of shape, who gets to the gym, like, who's going to the gym, and they can, like, you know, they have real trouble walking slowly on the treadmill, and they're drenched in sweat, as, you know, they're not even walking very fast because this is just so much work and they're not used to it. It's the people who are really fit. Those are the people who will be the biggest cheerleaders for the fat, out of, you know, the fat, unfit person who is trying. Because everybody who is good at what they do wasn't good at it at some point. Everybody who is strong was once weak, because we all start off as children. Everyone who has high endurance once started off with low endurance. And the way they got strong, the way they got high endurance, the way they got fit was through enormous amounts of painful, hard work. And so when they see somebody else, no matter how out of shape, putting in painful, hard work to try to make themselves better, they recognize a kindred spirit. They recognize somebody who is struggling and suffering in order to make themselves better. And they love seeing that. They love seeing other people doing that. And since these are the people who most value strength, speed, fitness, and so on, there is nobody on earth besides the jocks who will appreciate what that person, the out of shape fat person on the treadmill, barely doing anything but sweating like crazy. There's nobody who appreciates what they're trying to do more than the jocks, because the people who love that work and the results of that work most are the jocks. So, as a very, very practical sort of side note to this, if you're ever going into a gym to lift, learn some basic etiquette about like when people are lifting and when not to interrupt them and so on. But like, if you want help with something, the people who will be happiest to help you are the big people. Like, the big, strong people. Those are the people who will be happiest to help you in a gym. Because those are the people who love everything about this and love when people want to do it with them, or just want the same thing and appreciate the same thing. And they know that everybody starts somewhere, and the thing that really distinguishes the people who get really strong from the people who are there for a while and leave is your willingness to stick to it. And in every person who's finally coming to the gym, there's somebody who potentially is willing to stick with it, and they would love, for the most part, to be a part of that. I mean, every now and then you'll find, you can find a jerk among anyone, anywhere, in any group. There is no group that is still alive in which you will not find somebody that you won't get along with. Those caveats aside, this is the way the world actually really works. And this is why you see so much of this idea that it works in the opposite way. But yeah, as a side note, I recommend everybody lift weights. Lifting weights at least a little bit. Lifting some heavy things is just so good for you in such a large variety of ways, including just being absurdly practical. Because as human beings, we have to lift things up, including ourselves sometimes. And I remember one time when I had an abdominal surgery. And man, when your abdominal muscles get cut during surgery, you find out how many things use abdominal muscles. It's an astonishing number of the things, but especially stuff like getting up out of a chair. You use your abdominal muscles a lot. When they've been cut, that hurts like crazy. And so you learn how to do other things, about how to move yourself around so that you're not using your abdominal muscles to lift you. And one of the biggest ways to do that is with your arms, like to move yourself around, be able to push with your arms in your shoulder carriage while keeping your belly loose. And we all get injured in some way or another, and like having some strength to be able to compensate for not being able to do things normally is incredibly practical. Being able to help somebody carry something is incredibly practical. Being able to carry things for yourself is incredibly practical. So I mean, I didn't mean this to be a plug for weightlifting, but if you're not lifting weights, there are lots of programs for starting it. You don't have to go and try to deadlift twice your body weight. Just being able to deadlift just your body weight. It's not that hard. Just, basically a year of not overly intense practice, and you'll probably get there. And, you don't have to be super strong, but just stronger than doing nothing makes such a huge difference in life, and it's not that hard to do. It's time, it's effort, it's suffering, but it's not like, it's the sort of thing most people can achieve. Unless you have some underlying medical condition that would prevent it. Most people can achieve it without that much work. Few hours a week in the gym can do wonders in that regard. And I guess in some sense it probably is fitting to say that one of the other things about the jock versus nerd thing is that, I mean, everyone will have their own separate interests, but there shouldn't be that much space between them. And that's more because everybody should be able to pick up at least some heavy things than it is because everybody should watch science fiction shows. And, the real thing to go for is that Greek tripartite perfection of body, mind, and soul. And everyone should do that, including the body part. So, and when you do, jocks will probably be the people who will most want to help you out doing it. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.